Hey, Alli, have you ever had one of those days or seasons in your life where you just feel like you're putting on a show?
For sure. I have definitely put on a good face even when I didn't feel like it. Just like our guest today, who's going to delve into some mental health stuff and how she has put on a face and how she's dealt with some big mental health struggles. We have today Carrie Genzel, who is an actor and a mental health advocate on the show.
And before we dive in, let's give a shout out to Charlotte Heighton. Thank you for listening. Now let's dive in.
Welcome to the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, where we dive deep into pressing health and fitness issues facing aging women. I'm Alli Kerr.
And I'm Shawna Kaminski. And together we'll bring candid conversations, expert advice, and personal stories that will inspire and empower you on your own wellness journey.
We're so excited to get to talk to Miss Carrie Genzel today about her journey and a little delve into maybe some life stuff, some mental health stuff, and find out how we can just live healthier and happier lives. Welcome to the show, Carrie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, ladies.
Can you share a little bit about your upbringing in Vancouver as a fellow Canadian?
I know.
Yes, and
Yes.
how did that shape you to who you are today?
Well, growing up in Vancouver, um, I didn't realize how magical it was until I left. Until I was older and I left. I just thought every place was like Vancouver. And I do love it a lot. I do not miss all the rain though. The rain is a lot in the winter. But it is just absolutely stunning on a beautiful day. I think just the community itself. I grew up in a suburb of Vancouver, mainly Richmond, and just had a great community around me, which is wonderful and something that today, as an adult, we were seeking, which we have now found here in Macon, Georgia. But as a kid, I didn't really appreciate what I had around me. I was very shy, and I was very full of self doubt, and I was not. I was not the person that I am today, for sure. There has been a long journey to get from that little shy girl to the person that you see today, and from everything, from my career to relationships to everything, was so tied into my mental health journey, for sure. So growing up, I was very shy. I didn't like going to school. I was very self-conscious about maybe saying the wrong answer or what someone would think of me, and I just was so full of anxiety growing up. And it wasn't until high school when I discovered the drama club that I kind of found my group. I had a good friend of mine who was a wonderful actor, and he encouraged me to get in there. And again, at first I was very apprehensive because I looked at all of them and I'm like, oh, they're so funny and talented and everyone's laughing. And so I kind of sat on the side and just watched. And one day they were doing an improv exercise, and he reached his arm out and grabbed me and pulled me on stage. And I had this split moment of, oh no. And in that quick, moment of thinking, I was like, I'm either going to sink or swim. Like, I'm either going to stand here and not do anything and look silly, or I'm just going to dive in and participate. And I did, and I got a laugh. And that was kind of the spark, right? That was like, oh, right? The magic. Um, and I really, in that moment, like, things really changed for me. Like, I really was like, this is my group. Like, these are my people, these creative and funny and spirited people. Um, and it was really in drama that I decided that I really wanted to become an actor. And even at that age, like, I had an understanding that because I was so self-conscious and so shy, I really was playing characters every day. I would play the character that I thought you wanted to see because I didn't really like who I was. right? And so in life, I was already playing characters. So I thought, wow, if this is like a job that I could do, great, right? This is the path I'm going to go on, much to my parents' chagrin, who are like, no, this is not good. The last thing parents want to hear, I want to go into the arts. But our family didn't have anyone that was in the arts at all. So, of course, I was the trailblazer. I was like, no, this is what I'm going to do. And growing up in Vancouver, then there wasn't a lot of TV and film. Now it's a huge industry in Vancouver, but we had a few shows and the odd movie that would come into town. There wasn't a lot. And I got an opportunity to do like print work and modeling. Um, when I was in high school, and I thought, that's a faster way to get to, the goal was to get to Los Angeles. So I thought, well, that's going to be a faster way to get there. So I started doing a lot of print work and modeling, and I was doing that full time once I got out of high school. And from Vancouver, I got a contract with an agency in Toronto, and I was working in Toronto and Montreal. And then I got picked up by a big agency in Chicago, and that brought me into the US. And then I was working there. And then eventually I got to Los Angeles. So
Yeah.
I was.
So high school, so all this really, was it high school when everything just kind of, when you got into the arts, was that your first?
That was really it. That was
yeah.
really it. And I'm so grateful for my high school drama teacher, Mr. Gauthier, who has since passed away. But he really was so instrumental in letting me find my voice, not pushing me too much at first, when I was still very apprehensive. And I so appreciate that, because I think that if outside of my friend grabbing my hand, which I'm grateful that he did that, I still was a little like, this is cool and this is fun, but it wasn't like I went from 0 to 100, like it did take some time for me to get into the fold and the rhythm of the class and the other actors. But he really was wonderful. And I remember the last day of school and going into his office to say goodbye and to say thank you. And he's like, when you walked into on stage that first time, like you were so quiet, and like now we can't shut you up. It's like, but it was that I found my comfort zone. I found my tribe, and I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be an actor.
I totally can relate to the shy. I was the shy kid as well, and afraid to ever answer any questions, and
terrified.
Terrified.
What if I'm wrong? What if I say something and everyone laughs? What if I don't know the answer? All of that
what
stuff.
What if I look dumb? Yeah.
What if I look dumb? Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just think about that little girl and like how much anxiety she walked around with every single day. Like I remember just even leaving for school, and the anxiety that would it just would grow the closer I got to school. And it was all just my own,
our own mind.
It's all
the
me.
voices in our heads.
I didn't get bullied. I didn't have that experience. It was all me doing it to myself.
Yeah. And thankfully you had that person in your life that saw something or just decided to
that
give
was
you a
like,
little
come
push.
on up here. Yeah. And I think I try to be that person now for people, right? Of like, come on up here. I got you.
Love that.
Because it's so important to me. And there are other times in my mental health journey where that hand was extended to me in other ways that it's very important to me to give back in terms of the mental health community and share my story, because when we share our stories, we give permission to other people to share theirs, and you get a connection, because most of us have much more in common than we do have differences. And when we are able to be vulnerable and share that story, you realize that. And, I know, like I always say, like my vulnerability is my superpower, because it makes a stranger a friend in like a minute. And that's an incredible feeling to have somebody hear their story or feel like they have permission to tell theirs, and that connection of like, me too. And they're
Because we
like,
all have a
oh,
story. We all
right.
have stuff in there. We all have it.
Exactly. And then you don't feel so alone. And I think that, my journey from there is I
want to hear
started
about
to,
soap operas. I used to be a soap opera junkie, I have to admit. When I was a
yeah,
latchkey kid, and so I would come home, get off the bus, go home, and turn on the TV and
there
start
you
watching the
go. There's a
soaps.
lot of those kids. A lot of those kids. So once I moved to Los Angeles, I was still doing the print work and modeling, and I was transitioning into the acting. So I was working with acting coaches and so forth as I was sort of transitioning out of that, because I got to where I wanted to go, which is I wanted to get to Los Angeles. So there I was. And I started auditioning, and I got some little, like a little recurring role on The Bold and Beautiful. I was a nurse, and then I did some episodic television, and I had the opportunity to audition for All My Children. And the first time I auditioned, I got a screen test and they flew me to New York, and I didn't get that role. And then months later, there was something else. And so I auditioned again, and I went to New York, and I ended up booking that part. And you want to talk about my anxiety? My anxiety was through the roof. It was a very high profile role, and there were a lot of people watching me. Um, and it was my first like big job. I had done some little films, I had done some TV, I had done some things, but to have a contract role on a daytime drama that was on every day and had such history and legacy, and I'm working with Susan Lucci and like the greats of like daytime television, was really intimidating. And there were a lot of people there that, not the actors necessarily, but there were a lot of people that really wanted me to fail. And I could feel that,
Mm.
right? So it was also our executive producer, Francesca James. I was the first actor that was hired under her. So there was like, I didn't want to let Francesca down. I didn't want to let myself down. It was a lot of pressure. And also it was that moment where I lost my anonymity. So, as an actor, typically when you're working on film and TV, it's very insulated. Like you're working with people working on that production who work in the industry, and you film it, and then months later or a year later, it's out, right? With daytime soaps, you're filming at a studio. The fans know where that is, right? You got to get in and out of that studio, right? And it's on Monday through Friday. And it was very different. And I felt really exposed in a way. I felt like that little girl again, even though I was working and I was doing what I love to do. It was the scrutiny, because it was actually happening. You get people that would be like, oh, well, she doesn't dress the way she does on the show. Oh, her hair looks messy. Oh, her makeup's not on. Like you get
You couldn't
everything.
go out and just go out in public and not worry about it.
Well, but I did though. It's like,
Good for
and
you.
I lived on the Upper West Side, and we had a supermarket below our building. And so, you run out to get eggs and yogurt or whatever, toilet paper, whatever it may be. And I'm not going to go through the works of hair and makeup just to go get a few groceries. But because my character was very wealthy and put together, and she always looked fabulous, that's what people expected. So I'd be down there in like sneakers and overalls and like a ponytail, and they'd be like, what? And they'd say something. But for the most part, people would cheer the character on, or they had comments about what was happening on the show. But it really felt like living in a fishbowl. Even the NYPD would stop me sometimes to talk to me about what I had done on the show and like things like that. Like it was a lot. Like, and I went from like riding public transit to being like, oh no, because too many people would come over, and it just felt scary. It felt, like a lot of attention.
So, what strategies did you use to, first of all, initially get over some of your mental health like anxieties, and then did you use similar ones later? Like, do you have this toolbox of strategies of handling your anxiety?
Well, I have a toolbox now. I did not have a toolbox then. And so gosh, I really, looking back, like, I look back at that time and think how much time I wasted in my anxiety and self doubt. And I certainly enjoyed the experience and I got a lot out of that experience, but so much of it was not celebrating that. It was still in my head of like, I got to be perfect and I got to do this and I can't be the one to forget my lines and I have to this. And I put so much pressure on myself to be perfect, to
And
be.
that's what we do as women who aren't on TV and aren't in the public eye, just going out to dinner or going out to any public
And
thing.
there is scrutiny, like people do when you're on television look at you and judge, or who are you out with and what's
Mm,
going on? It's like I got on all my children and I was in a relationship which became a long distance relationship and then that ended. And later was in a relationship with someone on the show. So there was speculation and there was like all of this stuff. And it was like, I'm just trying to live my life
no.
and like go to work and do a good job. There was, so much going on. And I did not looking, I say this now that I did not handle it well. And I did a lot of things that just trying to self medicate, just trying to like calm my nerves, just trying to like fit in and be like, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to do that. I did not handle it well. And I know now, looking back, there were a lot of things that popped up that were not healthy behaviors just because I was trying to cope. You know,
Mm.
I became very, very obsessive about my space, my apartment, and it being perfectly clean and everything being in its place. And I couldn't leave unless everything was perfect. And I didn't even realize that I was in that behavior until a friend came to stay with me and was like, "Wow, what's going on here?" Like, do you realize like everything that you do before you leave your apartment? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because it became so a part of what I did. And I only realized that it was a problem when I couldn't stop doing it.
Mm.
When I tried to just leave and not go through this whole routine of straightening the pillows on the couch or like making sure the bed was perfectly made or things being a certain way in the kitchen, I would leave and feel anxious like something bad was going to happen because I didn't straighten the pillows. And, now looking back at that, I'm like, that is not healthy behavior, right? Um, and I realize now that like because I felt like my whole life was so out of control, beyond my control, right? That I was trying to control what I could.
We're going to interrupt this interview for just a second because we've got something we want to make sure that you know. If you're struggling with your health, with your fitness, if you don't know where to start or you know what to do and you're not doing it, we're here for you.
And all you need to do to get our help is to reach out to Shawna and I at our email, sapodcast23@gmail.com. And we're happy to help and we will be in touch. Now back to the show.
Right.
And even when we feel like people that might have been looking at you and said, "Oh, she has it all. She has this
Oh,
role.
yeah.
She's this beautiful woman. Look at her. Look at her. Look at her." But then they don't know, and
I have
I
no
think
idea.
that's really something that we, especially as women, we deal with, just worrying about what other people think.
Yes. And I think, it got much worse than that. I mean, that was really, gosh, the start of it. I mean, in high school too, like even as a teenager, there was a lot going on for me, and I worked through an eating disorder and very high anxiety, as I talked about, and depression. So it's not like I went through, and I did talk about being shy, but there was a lot going on for me as a teenager.
Mm.
So now I'm thrust into this very intense spotlight in New York City. I didn't know anybody when I moved there. I didn't even know New York at all. I remember I had an event to go to and I asked our head of wardrobe, I said, where do I go shopping? Like, where do I go buy something? Because I didn't know where anything was. And I have this scrutiny of like, who's this new woman on the show? What does she look like? Who is she? What is she wearing? And all that stuff. So it was a lot for me to take on, and not have a toolbox. If I wish I had the toolbox I have today, but that's all a part of the journey. So I was on the show for a few years, and then they wrote the character off, and I moved back to Los Angeles. And that's where things really started to go downhill in terms of my mental health. So I went from just the intensity of being on the show and loving the job and loving the actors I'm working with, and you get a lot of really cool opportunities when you're on the show to be a part of different charities and be invited to different things, and make a difference that way, and that feels great. And then it's just over. Right?
Wow. Like,
They're like,
stop,
we're writing
done.
off the show. Yeah, we're writing the character off the show. And I decided to move back to Los Angeles because there were more opportunities there. And it's like, I'm going back to auditioning again. So I went from having a great place to work and loving where I was and being in this great, exciting city and loving my job and being challenged as an actor, to now you're just one of the
Starting over.
thousands that are looking for a job every day. And that's tough mentally, right? When we as actors work, and I think in any field, if you're doing what you love, there's such a high that comes with that, of doing what you love. And as an actor, that there's that magic that happens when you hear like action. It's like this whole fantasy world comes to life, right? And you get to participate in that and have fun. And when that ends, it's like everything just goes dark, and you're like, okay, I got to get back out there.
And you have to not know what's next. That's got to be scary.
And you don't know what's next, right? And there's times that you're really busy, and there's other times when it's really quiet, or for some reason you're just not booking work, and you have very little control over that. And as an actor, it's very hard to kind of go with those ebbs and flows. For me, at the time, I had so much focus on my career, and I wasn't rounding out my personal life. I wasn't rounding out, like, what are the things I enjoy? What gives me joy? Like, everything that I was doing was focused on either, getting work, my career, or my appearance, because that's so tied into my work. And then as a woman, certainly in Hollywood, right, there's this very loud clicking, this clock ticking, right? Of like, you're getting older, like, oh, you're 30 now. Like, it's like 30's not old. But in Hollywood, you're like, it's your 30.
You're an ancient.
Now,
You're
ancient.
like timing out.
Like constant thing going on, right, in your head. And so if you're not rounding out your mental health, and you're not having, for me, it became very, very clear later about having good spiritual hygiene, like having a strong, spiritual life, to connect, be in nature, like all these things that I had to learn because I hit face planted at 35. Like, but I was still just going through the motions. But really, again, all of those things I was doing to self-medicate was getting amplified. So it's like, going out and having too many drinks with friends, shopping consistently, putting too much importance on people in my life and what I wanted them to do and how I wanted them to show up for me. And if they didn't, then it was a big deal. And it was, I think, I could sort of feel mentally that things were starting to fall, and I was just grasping at anything, right? And so I was overindulging in everything, right? Just trying to control and self-medicate and make myself feel better with outside things, And that's easy to do in Los Angeles because there's always a lot of people that are unemployed. So there's always people to go out and go to dinners with and drink with and shop with and do this with and that with. And, so I didn't even sort of see where I had turned a corner. And
Mm.
those things became so important to me because I was trying to numb myself and to sort of control the uncontrollable, right? And it got to a point where I was just starting to isolate and stay at home and not reach out to people. And, I grew up in a home where we did not talk about feelings. We still don't really talk about feelings with my parents. Just a different generation, different, different time. But I did not grow up with that tool. And I was always told, Carrie, people don't want to hear about your problems. They have their own problems. And if you talk about your problems, they're not going to want to talk to you. And I carried that around like a badge of honor. Like, I got this. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Even though I was just falling apart inside. And it was kind of, Alli, what you were saying is that being in the public eye, being on television and in film, people are like, oh, look at her. She's on the red carpet. Look at that pretty dress. Look at her smiling. Look at her this. I'm an actor. I can play the role, right? But when I went home and shut the door, I would fall apart.
And
Because
so many of us gals are great actors at putting on
we are great actors.
face.
That's correct. We put on the lipstick, the mascara, we go out and we're fine, but we're not fine. And I was literally dying inside. And that just kept escalating and escalating and escalating until I just couldn't do it anymore. And I just did not want to be here. I just, at the thought of waking up and my life became like Groundhog's Day. Like, it was like the same thing over and over and over again. And I got to a point where I was angry that I woke up. That's how I'd start my day. I'd wake up and go, ugh, here we go again. Here we go again. Right.
Well, what helped you to turn the corner on the Groundhog Day?
Yeah. A very dear friend who I actually let into my life at a time when I was not even talking to people. I was very isolated. This was someone I knew who worked in my industry. And for some reason, when he said, hey, do you want to go for dinner sometime? I said, yes, which is like, was very not the way I was living my life at that time. Some reason I said yes. And we got to know each other, and he shared his story with me. And he has a pretty wild story. And I thought, well, good for you. Good for you for turning your life around. Like, I didn't connect with the story. There was a reason why he was telling me that story, because he could see himself in the way I was living my life. All of the spinning plates that I had going on of I'm fine, everything's good. He recognized that I was not fine.
Yeah.
And so that's why he shared his story with me. And it wasn't until months later that one day I woke up, same thing, woke up, was angry. I woke up and sat there and I just felt numb. I just felt like I didn't feel anything anymore. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore. And I picked up the phone and I called him and I said, I don't know what to do, but I know that I need help. And oh my gosh, I get so emotional just even remembering that moment, because that's when my life changed. That phone call changed my life. And he said, well, what are you willing to do? And I said, anything. And he said, good. Good. And I always say, like, I had the gift of desperation, right? That was a gift, because I am very stubborn. I am somebody who had always been so fiercely independent and strong. I had gotten through a lot in my life, and I had always just sort of propelled myself through life of like, I'm going to do this, and people think I can't do it, and I'm going to show them, and I'm going to do this. But I could not think my way out of this. It was getting worse because the problem was my thinking. right? You can't outthink your way out of bad thinking. And all of my life experiences and things growing up in my childhood and everything, you can't run away from it, right? And so it was that phone call that really started the rebuilding of my life. It was, I always say that's when I actually started living my life, because I was so afraid to tell anybody what was going on. I never felt like I deserved any of the success. Even when I was on TV and I was this, I'd always be like, oh, thank you, but, and I would make up an excuse, right? I would take the compliment away. Because I just really didn't believe that I was deserving, because I just felt like I was.
Like that imposter syndrome that we often
Yeah,
all
I
get.
absolutely did. I absolutely did. And so anytime anything didn't go my way or anything negative happened or was said, I was like, yep, there you go. They see you. See, you're a piece of crap, right? And they're the negative, I call it the shitty committee. Like, then the negative comments start, right? And the hamster wheel of everybody knows, they're all laughing at you, they're all looking at you, they're all. And
we all have those voices. It's just a matter of where we are. And it sounds like you were in a place where you were at a place of overwhelm, maybe, where it was just, life was just too much.
Well, it was too much because I wasn't actually living and present and knowing. I hadn't done the work at that point and I didn't have the tools. So I didn't know what this was. Like, I didn't know. Now if that pops up, because it's going to, I go, thanks for sharing, but shut up.
You know how to put the committee in its place now.
That's right. Thanks for sharing. Goodbye. Like, thanks for it's lies. You're lying.
And have you gotten help to help you with the tools to be able? Because so many folks, and Shawna and I both work with a lot of women, and we have those committees that are just really strong in our heads, telling us all kind of lies about ourselves, whether it's about our appearance, whether it's about our worth, whatever it is. And how do we get the tools, and how did you get the tools to change that conversation?
Well, going back to like, what are you willing to do? Anything. I really just dove into every suggestion. And, starting with my friend, he had put me in touch with, it was like a group, like a support group, right? Predominantly women. And that helped me a lot. Like, it really took me a while to trust women in particular, because being in the industry I was in, there was that competition and that sort of spirit of sometimes of like, I'm not going to be nice to you because you might get it and then I don't get it and this and that. And that's not just in my industry, that's anywhere. But it took me, and I realized, like, somebody had said to me, like, because I said, well, I don't trust women. And they were like, well, do you think that maybe you don't trust women because you don't trust yourself? And I was like, like, what? Like, when I first started my journey in mental health, I was so quick to point the finger at everybody else. And I had to really swallow that pill of like, well, what was your part in all of this? And my part's all over it, right? Like, there are things that happened as a child that I didn't take part in. Things did happen as a child that, it's different. But when you're an adult, you're choosing these things, whether you know or not, right? You're choosing the people that you're allowing into your life. You're choosing to react the way that you're reacting. You're choosing, the career or the field that you're going to be working in and focusing on. Like, you're choosing all of that. And there's a responsibility with that. It's not just pointing the finger. Life isn't just happening to everybody. You're taking part and engaging, right? And it was hard at first for me to take responsibility for that. And once I was able to do that, that it was so powerful because I'm like, wow, like, okay, now I have choices. Like not having this knowledge now and saying, okay, I get to choose. Um, I have power, right? I'm not powerless over these people that are in my life. If these people aren't aligned in how I'm living my life today, and they don't want the best for me, why do I choose to have them in my life? Right? They
Mm.
don't have to be in my life. There's a whole world full of people out there, right? Go find
That's
those
a
people.
That is a great lesson because so many of us are surrounding ourselves with people that are not serving us well, maybe, and
Right.
so maybe reevaluating that. And then if there's somebody out there listening to your story and they're maybe struggling with the voices in their head, the committee, or
Yes.
mental health struggles, or just not wanting to be here, what recommendations? Like, where does someone start? I know where you started, but what do you recommend that they do?
Definitely, for me the biggest step was telling somebody what was really going on, how I was feeling, because that was like my big secret. Once that secret was out, it was out and it no longer had power over me. And my friend had said to me, he said, I want you to call your parents and I want you to call your close friends and I want you to tell them what you just told me. And I was like,
Mm. Oh,
what?
scary.
Like,
To
scary, right?
bringing it to light, shining
But
a light on it.
I did it.
Mm.
And it was, especially my parents, like it was really difficult, although they said like we noticed something was going on, we just didn't know what it was, because whenever we'd ask you, you'd go, I'm fine. Right? And
Yeah.
if you keep saying you're fine, what how are we going to know what's happening? But I think for me a big part of it was letting down the facade, right? It was
Mhm.
telling people in
Getting
my life
real.
what was really going on. Because in doing that, people had suggestions, right? People were like, oh, I see there's, and I learned a lot about my friends, like doing that they weren't sharing with me because I wasn't sharing with them. That my friend of mine is like, oh, I have this incredible counselor that I've seen for years. I'm like, really? Like, I realized how surface a lot of these close friendships were that I had because I wasn't opening up to them. So they
Mm.
didn't necessarily share that information with me. So,
And there's a stigma too. Like with mental health, I think we kind of think like, oh, that's somebody else. Anything to do with mental health, that's just like our physical health. I mean, that's
right,
something that we all deal with. But I think that we
exactly.
like to think that we don't deal with that. So many of us.
Right.
Or
And,
we don't want other people to think that we deal with that.
right.
Any kind
But
of challenges.
most people in their lifetime, whether it's for a season or a lifetime or a few seasons or chapters, have struggled or will struggle with the mental health issue. There's a lot that happens to us in a lifetime that,
Especially as women.
yes, that we may not have the tools or we may not be equipped in that moment to deal with. So you got to get reinforcement. So whether it's I worked with a counselor that helped me tremendously. Like I say, I should have had counseling or therapy as a teenager, and my parents had tried by taking me to our general, doctor
Mhm.
to like have me go in. And of course, I went in being the actor I am, going, everything's fine, everything's cool. And he's like, yeah, but she seems fine. you know?
Mhm.
So at 35, walking into a counselor's office for the first time, I was like skipping in. Like, I was like, what do you want to know? Let's go. Like,
Mhm.
I was so
You are ready.
ready. I said, I always say, like, I walked in there and I felt like I walked in with like a box full of like puzzle pieces. And I thought they were from all different puzzles and they didn't actually make the picture that was on the box. But what I realized is they were all the same picture. And like he helped me kind of piece it all together so that I had a complete picture. And it helped me so much to sit down with somebody who is a professional and just be honest and
Mhm.
help me piece together all of these stories, which I learned some of them were not even true. They were things that were said to me because they're a reflection of somebody else's mental health, right?
Right. Yeah.
And those stories were never even true. But I got to piece them all together and learn a lot about the root and core of why I'm triggered by certain things, why I react to certain things, why certain things are very meaningful to me, and why, the why. I'm a big like investigator. Being an actor, it's all about like, you craft the character and you have to kind of be a detective, right? To start finding the details in the script to create this character. So in my life, I really looked at that time in my life as I don't really know who I am, because I've been playing all these people, not just on screen, but in real life, that I've never
Mm-hmm.
ever asked myself the question, who am I? And that was scary. I was asked to write it down and the paper was blank. And I
Mm.
just said, I don't know. And I had this like wave of panic of, I don't even know who I am. But in that moment, I thought, you know what? I can take this as an opportunity to discover who I am. And
Mm-hmm.
so for like about 3 years, I said, like, I'm in my season of yes. If someone asks me to do something or try something, the answer is yes. I don't have to do it again if I don't like it, but I have to try it. Right. And so I went and did all of these things. It's like I took tap dancing classes and I went and learned fencing and I did like anything that would come up and someone was like, do you want to try this? I'd go, yes. Right. Even if I was like, I do not want to try that at all, but I'm going to do it once. And just in doing that, I really started to learn about who I was. I also started to meet new people. And I started to meet people who were also saying yes to things. And that inspired me. And I started to look for more people like that. And I started to look for, in particular, women who were on their own mental health journey, even if it looked completely different than mine, because I can learn a lot from them and they could learn a lot from me. And I started to really evaluate the people that were in my life, and if they were people who were, working to be their best selves and they were supportive people, and those people that were not, there definitely were people in my life when I made this change that wanted me to stay who I was because that's what made them comfortable, or that was the girl they could call to go spend too much money shopping or have too many drinks at the bar or whatever it may be, right? That they didn't necessarily want to see that stop because that may make them look at themselves, and I did have that happen where people were like, well, if you're all these things, and we hung out so much together, does that mean I am? And I said, that's your
Mm-hmm.
journey. Like, this is just
Right.
my experience. This is my path, right? You do
Did,
you.
did you feel like you were making more connection once you felt like you were being more of your authentic self? Once you were saying yes to things, and were you connecting with people at a not that superficial level? And was that more satisfying for you?
Absolutely. Yes. Even people that had been in my life for 10, 12 years, and I considered my closest friends, I realized like once I started talking about the real stuff that was going on with me, I realized just how surface a lot of those relationships really were. Like a friend of mine had said to me, I considered her at that point my closest friend, and it had been about 12 years since we had met. And she said, do you know that in 12 years, I've never once seen you cry? And I
Mm.
said, what? What are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, Carrie, think about that. Think about all the things that have happened in your life in 12 years, breakups, disappointments, jobs, just all these things, deaths into the family. I've never once seen you cry.
Wow. Yeah.
And because I thought, well, that's weakness. If I'm vulnerable and I cry in front of somebody, well, then they've got something on me. They know that I'm weak and I can't be weak. And that's just so false.
And
It
it's,
was putting up this barrier between
mm-hmm.
me
It's,
and these people that genuinely did care about me, because
yeah, when
I
we,
wouldn't let them in.
Man, when we tap into our real self or work on our mental health, it really does allow us to, I think, get so much more out of life
Yes.
versus living in this facade of, the hair, the makeup, everything is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's, and I have to say, Allie, what's really interesting is moving to the South. So the South is a whole,
It's
is
a
a whole thing.
whole
Is a whole
nother
other
thing.
thing, right? Because everyone always looks fabulous, and there's a whole sort of protocol as to how things kind of happen. And I'm not from here at all, so I'm just me, and
Mm-hmm.
I just go up to people and I'm like, "Hi, how are you?" And I look people in the eye and I smile, and and I want to know how they really are. I don't want the dog and pony show. Like I really, if I'm asking you how you are, I really would like to know who you are, because I'm interested and I care. Right? But it's very funny to kind of watch different groups of people and how they kind of maneuver around. And it's, there's a bit of a show, right? Like,
Oh,
there's a
just
lot of,
yes. In the South,
yeah,
just a little bit of a show.
just a little
Just a
bit.
little lot.
It's
Yeah.
very funny. People always say to me, they're like, "You're not from here, are you?" And I'm like, "What gives me away?"
Yes,
What
we
is it?
definitely have a challenge with being our author. I would say that. I mean, I think I can say that. I grew up here, so in this
Yes.
area, so I feel
Yeah.
like I can. I feel like for at least I can say for me, that's definitely been a challenge growing up in the South and feeling that pressure to to project that everything is okay and that you
Yes,
know.
and juggling all those balls, like as women, all the things that we do, and we put that pressure on ourselves if it has to all be perfect and it all has to look, like a picture of perfection. And it's impossible. It's
And
absolutely impossible.
and it's so liberating when you
Mm.
realize no one is expecting perfection. And when you don't expect perfection for yourself or from yourself, it is very liberating.
It's
So
very liberating. It's, going back to the vulnerability of, talking about who we really are in our struggles, and how much strength you can draw from that, and that connection and bond with somebody who you may have never met before, that is like, wow, me too. And then they share their story, and for that moment there's that really intense, strong bond and that connection. I think that when I was isolating, I really did feel disconnected and alone. And when I went into group therapy the first time and I heard people talking and hearing my story, when they were talking about how they felt and what they were doing, and all of these things, even though everyone in that room had come from different backgrounds and different education and all that, but we're all sound the same. Right? We
Yeah,
all really struggle with the same things. And mental health doesn't care what job you have, what car you drive, where you grew up, how
no,
much money is in your bank account. It really doesn't, because I've done a lot of speaking in all kinds of different neighborhoods and different facilities. And I can tell you that I can have a really wonderful conversation with anybody, anywhere, about this stuff, because we all struggle with those same things. And I hope that it becomes less and less of a stigma of, well, we don't talk about these things. I do hear more talk, more mental health talk, but there's still that
there is still
resistance.
a
You
stigma,
know,
sure.
there's still a stigma, and
And because
and I
part of it is because of the committee in our head saying you don't want to be different. You don't be you want to like just toe the line.
But
Don't
I have to say, as someone who's very outspoken, like, it's very freeing. It's exactly
very
what Shawna was saying. It's very liberating just to say, here I am, right? I think that, so a
y'all
part of
hear
my
that, ladies? It's very liberating.
very
Let me
liberating.
just
So a part of my story, so about 3 4 years into my mental health journey, I hit a big slump, and I didn't realize how bad it was, because I was doing all the stuff, right? I was doing all the stuff I was supposed to be doing, and I was journaling, and I had a gratitude list, and I was still going and seeing a counselor, and I was still doing my group therapy with, again, it was, predominantly women, and connecting with women who were on their journey. But there was something wrong, and I felt empty, and I didn't know what was going on. And I remember sharing for weeks and weeks. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I did have a relationship that was sort of winding down. I'd had relationships end before. So it's like, I just was like, I couldn't put my finger on it. I just felt like I was sliding. And looking back, I should have like, there were maybe some things I should have doubled down more on, but I was kind of trying to get all those tools in the toolbox, right? I was like
It can
pulling out all
sneak
the
up on
tools.
us when we least expect it. You think you're doing all the things, but there it
That's right.
is.
And the one thing that I wasn't doing, which I realized later, was keeping spiritually fit. So I was doing all the stuff. I was writing, and I was, like I said, I was doing all the stuff, but I wasn't really kind of connecting to, you know, a power greater than myself, or a God, or whatever you may call that. And that's a big part of my mental health. Is it helps me feel more connected and grounded. And I find a lot of connection in nature and the animals. Like there's a lot of things that I do, but I wasn't connecting to my spirituality. And as a result, I attempted suicide.
And what age were you then, Carrie?
So I would have been, well, this happened 15 years ago. And I'm 53 now. It was something that I had thought about. And here's what's so crazy, going back to the actor. I actually gave a mental health talk the morning of.
Wow.
Then knew what I was going to do, went home.
Wow.
And went to the location that I had predetermined where this was going to happen. You're talking about the actor. And I remember after giving that talk, that the women came up to me and said, "Thank you so much. That was really inspiring." And I was like, "Oh, that's right." And I'm talking to these women, and I was at that point so disconnected from myself, that I was, when I think back to that day, I very much had like disassociated from myself. Like I'm watching it like a movie. Like it's not me actually talking and driving and going. I'm like watching it happen. And after I had done what I did, I was in a very isolated place, and there was nobody around, and I didn't take my phone. And I remember, and it was dark, and I was looking up at the stars, and I regretted what I had done. And I remember praying, and I remember saying, like, there's nothing that I can do to help myself in this moment. And I regret what I did. And I need help. And I literally heard a voice say, "It's going to be okay." And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if that meant you're going to die, but you're going to be okay, or you're going to be okay. I didn't know what it meant, but I felt peaceful. And then I passed out. And I woke up the next day, and I was in emergency in Santa Monica, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't have any recollection even of who I was. And the nurse came in and saw that I was awake, and she thought, "Oh, she's awake, because I was unconscious when they brought me in. Somebody had found me the next morning and called 911. And later in the day, when I started to remember a little bit more, the doctor came in, and I just remember that she was looking at my chart, and she was like, "Well, Carrie, if you were a cat, you just blew 8 lives." She said, "I'm amazed that you're here." That was a lot for me to process as well. Why did I survive? Why? What am I doing? Like, why? Why me? Right? Because there were a number of factors that probably should have taken my life over the course of that night, and they didn't. I thought, well, why am I still here? Part of my mental health journey has always been like, ask for the answers and they'll come, because they do, right? but you got to have an open mind and open heart to receive them. It's not, I want it, please show me the direction I need to go in, but it needs to come in this form on this day, right? It's like, it's going to come in different ways, whether it's a song on a radio, whether it's like, a random message from a friend, or a particular bird landing on a tree, or there's so many different things that can like give you those kind of signs to keep going on the path. And so as I was recovering from that, I really just kept saying, like, what is it that you want me to do? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? During the course of that exploration, I realized that I survived so that I can tell my story. I survived so that I can say to people who may be sitting in the darkness that there's hope and there's help, and that you don't have to sit there alone.
And let's repeat that. There's hope, there's help, and you don't have to sit there alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I always say, like, I've had the opportunity through being an actor, I've been connected to different organizations. And one of them is Attitudes in Reverse, which is an incredible nonprofit that goes into schools to bring mental health, education, and suicide prevention. And I've had an incredible opportunity to go in several times in person, and I've also done it on Zoom to tell my story. And it's really incredible to see how many hands go up when you ask, like, how many of you have been affected by suicide? Most hands in the room will go up.
Wow.
Even as low as like the second grade. Well, so many people have been touched by it, whether it's a family member or friend or someone at their school or so forth. And it's definitely on the rise. So like I always say, when we don't talk about our mental health, we lose people. People die.
Yeah.
People die.
Yeah.
In the shadows because they're too afraid to speak up. So when I get the opportunity to speak about it, I would say, like, if this is you and you're sitting here and listening to me, I'm coming to you from the future, because there's a bright future out there. You got to, like, almost like my friend who pulled me up on stage, you got to reach out and take that hand.
Mm-hmm.
So
right?
If you had a wish for our listeners, maybe that was it, but you have a specific wish for our listeners today, Carrie, after that powerful story.
I would say my wish for everybody is to find the courage to speak your truth and to share yourself with someone that you may know or trust, or someone in your community, or just reach out for help. There's a lot of free help out there. I know here in North America, and I think they're doing it in Canada now as well, 988. So you can call or text 988 and get mental health support immediately. But there's a lot of free resources out there. There's a lot of support out there. And so my wish is that you find the courage to speak your truth. And sometimes, even if it's a whisper, right, that can change your life. It changed mine. So that's my wish.
Alli?
My wish would be that we get that feeling of liberation, of being our real selves and just putting it out there.
Yes.
Yeah. And mine is finding that person, and even if you're just whispering into their ear, just taking a chance and letting a little bit of the truth out, because that crack of light can open things wide.
Thanks for listening. You'll find me, Alli, on Instagram at Alli Kerr Fitness.
And you'll find me, Shawna, on Instagram at Shawna Kaminski. Feel free to pop us a DM with questions and or feedback.
If you're enjoying the Girls Talk Healthy Aging podcast, please subscribe and share it with other health-minded women. Ratings and reviews are also much appreciated and help us get our message out to a larger audience.
Until next time, be healthy and be happy.